Welcome to the Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary podcast. This is your host, Scotty B. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Drive. Before we do, please feel free to find me online on Instagram at Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary. You can tweet me at HoCS Podcast. You can follow me on Vero, Scotty B Official. And of course, you can find me on spaces like YouTube and in other places down the road. I'll always have notes in the show notes for anywhere that you can follow me and support the podcast and the people who I have on the show, of course. And if you have any inquiries, comments, or questions, you can always email me, scottyb@hocspodcast.com. Love to hear from you. So today we're going to talk about Drive and really what drives you to continue to create cosplay, especially in the context of the world that we live in now, where we have pandemics and other strange things going on. Who knows what's coming next, and who knows where the cosplay world will go in 2021. Will it all be online? Will it all be virtual conventions? Will conventions be normal? Will people be normal at conventions? Will we all have to wear masks? What will happen? And what do you share? Do you share your cosplay with everyone? Do you go to the photo shoots? Do you pay for all of these cons and comics and figurines and props and everything else that's going on in the cosplay world and still continue to be motivated to create cosplays and have cos plans and promote cos positivity? So what's your motivation? What's your motivation in buying a costume, putting it on, and going to photo shoots and putting up content? Why did you pick this, and why are you doing it? And we've talked about why on the show before in that format, the philosophies of a gentleman called Simon Sinek. Blank, so that blank, and that's really the format, is when you're thinking about your why and why you do something, it's blank, so that blank. And finding a good reason or having a good internal motivation to do something works a lot better for you than just making money at it or just doing it to do it, so that it becomes a job and it becomes a chore and you just don't want to do it anymore. Money can be a very poor motivator. It doesn't necessarily drive you to do anything. It really just drives you to make more money. And when money becomes your only motivation, you can honestly make it doing anything. Yes, it's great to make money in cosplay if that's your goal. It's a hobby, but it doesn't have to be. You can use it for different things. It can be a platform that leverages you into other areas. It hits a lot of different things. If your only reason for doing this is because you think it's really cool that people pay you to do it, then you're not going to last long. And you might disagree with me, and that's fine. I don't actually care if you disagree with me about that. We'll see. If you stand the test of time, maybe it doesn't matter to you. Maybe it doesn't matter that you don't actually have a passion for anything that you do, so long as it provides you with a six-figure income. You're good. You check the box and you're done. The issue with that, how do you identify with your audience, your market, your clients, when really all you're interested in is their money? If you're not interested in helping people, how can you really help them? Or do you even care if you help them? You don't. You're just trying to always add on another service. You're just trying to always get more for yourself. And if it's that self-motivated or self-driven to the extent that it's just about collecting money from someone else and how much you can get from that person without really doing anything, or maybe you do something, but the idea is that you want to provide the value for them. We'll talk about that. But that you're driven to do so, and that you're driven to do so by more than simply obtaining more things. Great to have things paid for by your community and people that appreciate your content, but it's another thing entirely to be able to give back to them the same way that they give to you. That you're not just providing them with engagement, acting like some sort of a celebrity for them, an accessible celebrity at that, but that you are actually helping them do something or get somewhere, that you're actually contributing to a cause, and that is the reason you get out of bed every day. I'm not saying that cosplay is the reason that you should get out of bed every day, but what I am saying is that if you get out of bed every day and you kind of look at what you have to do with your cos plans and you kind of look at your job in the same way, you go, well, they pay me, so I guess. That's not going to last too long. You're going to feel miserable. And yes, people will say it's much better to be rich and miserable than it is to be poor and miserable, But I also kind of disagree with that, because if you're miserable, that's definitely going to reflect on everyone else. It's gonna come out. Don't care how good of an actor you are. If you're inside just kind of crumbling, people are going to notice that. It's going to affect the type of offer that you have. It's going to affect what you communicate to people. And yes, you can be completely fake inside of the cosplay world, but it only goes so far. I just don't recommend you try to be anything but authentic to what you're trying to do for your audience in the white space that you're finding and with the cosplays that you pick. So what's really the difference? There's external motivation and there's internal motivation, right? External, internal. Things in your environment that influence what you do, the external motivation. And so this is, fitness is a good place to go for external motivation, because in fitness, this would be something like, well, I have to go to a wedding, so I need to lose 15 pounds, and I need to do it in 2 months. And that's not really that easy to do, but it's doable. You could probably hurt yourself doing it, but this is an external motivation. You're going to be seen by other people in a context that you want to be seen a certain way. Sounds a little bit like cosplay. And you're going to work this hard to do this for that reason. But then when you get to that reason and you get to that shape, or you get to that weight or whatever you wanted to do, and you get past the event, now what? Do you go back to doing what you were doing? You eat whatever you want, you live how you want, you gain all the way back, and you start to kind of feel lousy again, because all of that progress you just wiped out. The only reason you did it was for something external. So what happens when you become internally motivated about something? What happens when you're internally motivated about cosplay? That you really just like doing it, and you really just want to kind of figure it out and see if it works. And be like, well, I'll just get this stuff and I'll just see what happens. It's really about that pursuit of knowledge, the knowing that you're doing it for the improvement of yourself or someone else. I'm going to get better at this. I'm going to learn more about this. And it all comes from within you. You're internally motivated to do it, which is hard. It's hard to stay motivated to do anything. I mean, if you're not being incentivized by money or something else, but it also pays off in the long run to have that internal drive, a reason, a why behind what you're doing and what you're providing for everyone in your space. It also helps your audience figure out where you're going with something, because I find that very frustrating sometimes. If I'm following somebody and I've followed them for years and years, or whatever the case may be, or I've interacted with that person for a long time and I can't figure out where they're going with something, well, what are you ultimately trying to do? It's not that you're really providing an offer and you're not really collecting anything. It's really just branding. And it's just forever. I find that very confusing sometimes. Drive is a little bit of a balance between the two, where you're going towards something and it's not just content for content's sake so that you can keep people on the hook, but you're not really hooking them into anything. You're just trying to maintain that follower count, something like that. And really you have to think about what comes after, right? And this is, again, the difference between external motivation and internal motivation. I think I've talked this through well enough through the example that I provided. Really, if you have questions, you know where to find me. You can always email. So what do you do when you're trying to scale? If you're just starting out, if you're just new to cosplay, you're trying to scale. If you even know what that term means, if you're new to cosplay and you're like, I want more followers, I guess that's really what scaling is about. So you start small and you get 100 people, and then you get 500 people and 1,000, and you grow these organic followings. Or you use paid ads and you grow them that way. Usually that just amounts to more likes. People generally don't follow, but hey, that's it works differently in different contexts. I can talk about that at length. So the first thing you need to do is you have to realize a drive means momentum. So the more driven you are to do something, the more momentum you're going to build. And any of these, if you get on YouTube, or if you're on Twitch, or wherever you are, everything is about snowballing that momentum. So when you get to 100 followers, things change a little bit. When you get to 500 and 1,000 and you get those hours in and you monetize, things change a little bit. And you keep laddering that momentum. You kind of want to keep it rolling so that you can continue to build and eventually come up with this strategy for making your brand well known and developing it as a career or whatever you're transitioning to. You have a path. So how do you generate momentum? Well, the first thing you have to do in order to gain any sort of momentum in cosplay is to start. Then you have to know where your limits are, and have to know how to leverage your time, set your budgets for your time and resources, and really focus in on what it is that you're trying to do. So if you're all over the place and you really can't figure out what it is you want to provide, or if you think you're stuck with one thing, which I think it can be very frustrating for a cosplayer when they start to get known for a character and then they can't do anything else, or at least they don't think they can, or that the thing that they do besides that just doesn't get any of the attention. Well, think about it as starting over with something, first of all, but it's also just, what are you driven to do? Like, are you driven to create the cosplays, or are you driven to create this one character and be known for that? That this is all part of the plan. So don't care about the outcomes when you get started or when you're trying to establish that sort of momentum. Don't care about how all of that works out. Document, plan, do what makes you happy first. And when you start out, like, don't worry about the engagement. I don't worry about it now. I mean, so 40 people clicked the like button. Okay, fine. It's on one platform. So 3 people saw my Vero post. Well, that's fairly typical. I'm not rising to the top of an Instagram platform for a lot of different reasons. I'm not really looking to use the platform to do that right now anyways. I believe that there is a lot of value that can be added to these spaces in terms of entertainment, but I also believe that they can be used for video content, and that morphing into video content is really where I want to go with everything, providing you with more sensible bites of information that you can't get in a podcast, but you can get in a video, and then, transitioning that into a platform that adds value but also provides me with some kind of passive income. And by passive, I don't mean passive like I didn't work for it, but that it just exists in a space. It's digital and it can be downloaded over and over again, and it's relatively uniform. It'd be great to monetize, create an income doing this. How much that is, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. It's something to work towards. And if you're first starting out, if your following isn't where you want it to be, or you don't think you have enough people behind you, that you really just document what you're doing, and that you start to develop a theme and a brand and a persona, and you figure all of this out as you go, which is fine, because it's all about learning, and it's all about failing and getting better from those failures and from your experience, because that's what you gain as time goes on. You gain more experience. Whatever you're building, whatever you're creating, whatever you're providing, you're going to get better at all of that. Might take time. If you're 22, you have a lot of time. You might not think you do, but you do. You have so much time. It's so crazy to think about being that age and how you can waste a lot of your time. You have to be very careful and focused about how you use it always. I wish somebody would have told me this when I was that age, but maybe I would have ignored them, right? Because that's what you do when you're younger. You kind of don't care what people who haven't used their time over long stretches of times have done, and now they're, in hindsight, trying to warn you about this process of not doing things that you want to do now and not getting to that point, not taking the time to say, okay, if I invest in myself now, this is what it can lead to. Investing in yourself. It doesn't mean working past burnout. If you're burned out, you're not going to help anyone. You're certainly not going to help yourself. If you're just trying and pushing so hard and you're hospitalizing yourself, which are stories that I've heard from other people, if you're starting to use the E word in entrepreneur, I've maybe heard a couple of cosplayers start to use the word entrepreneur. And for somebody who has a degree in entrepreneurship and who has master's degrees, that's all fine and good. I guess I do have my opinion about it, though. I'm not going to get into that on a motivational cast talking about drive, but entrepreneurship, and I will go with Gary Vee on this, is very romantic right now. It's being romanticized. It's becoming, especially Well, in the United States, where we're seeing a record level of unemployed and we're seeing people turn to a gig economy because it is a space where you can control the flow of income and you can control your clientele and you have a lot more control over what you provide and for what you're given for providing that. Whereas if you're working for someone else, you have a wage, they look at your experience, they look at your education, and they go, no. And it's very judgmental, and there's a lot of politics involved with offices and all of these other things, especially if it's really competitive like it is now and it's harder to find work. A lot of people are experiencing this issue, especially younger people. And every year we're going to graduate more people into the workforce with more skills, or that are all looking to gain more experience. So if you're a cosplayer, on top of all of these other issues that are going on, it can be very hard to not burn the candle at both ends. You're going to be trying to do all of these things and make all of this money so that you can use the money on the cosplays, and that you can still create, and that you can still kind of feed the beast that is social media and keep everything going. So you have to be driven, but if you're that crazy driven, it's also not going to last long. You're going to burn out, and then you're going to feel like things are dropping off, or that it's really just not worth it because you're just killing yourself. It also doesn't mean that you have to be bossy with everybody, and that's, I guess, a term that people get offended when it's used. I don't see that it's used with men as often. I'll leave it at that. I think that both men and women can be bossy, especially when they're trying to establish some sort of dominance or authority in a space like cosplay. Bossy isn't bullying, and I have to be very careful about that distinction, as does everyone else. Is if you're being a bossy pants, that isn't the same as bullying people. You're not trying to put someone else down by being bossy. You're just trying to get your way, which is a little different, unless they happen to coincide. Which things can, if you want to be the only person who does cosplay X and someone else is doing cosplay X and you start to get on their case about that cosplay, well, now you're crossing into bullying. We don't have a tolerance for that. That doesn't make you driven. So being bossy and being driven aren't the same. You can be assertive and be driven because you're going to run into situations where you're going to need to be assertive in this industry. You're also going to run into situations where you're going to have to ask for help. And I'll just throw this tip out there. If you get a lot of questions, or if you're asking a lot of people for help, but if you're on the other side of that, so if you're somebody who gets a lot of questions, if you get a lot of the same questions, you might look for making a video out of that question. Just saying. And it can be a one-off, because then you can just refer people to the video and you don't have to type to them or ignore them, which can be just as bad in some cases. Like, I know maybe you've never heard from the person before, and people do this. They'll just try and send a random DM to you asking a question. Maybe they want to establish a relationship, or maybe they just want to build something for themselves, but it can get a little awkward. It's a little less awkward if you just have the video. How do you ask for help? Well, again, it goes into establishing a know, like, and trust, and it really is a two-way street. So if you're going to ask someone to do something, be prepared to do something back, do something for them, add value to something for them, or if they ever come back to you, to make sure that you remember that you got help from them and then you need to help that person too. Also comes down to what you need help on, and you have to be very clear about that. If you're coming to somebody and just asking them how to make money, you're not going to get an answer. If you're just asking somebody, well, I don't know about foam, can you tell me? I don't know about sewing, can you show me how? Like, that's a big topic and a lot. You have to be very specific. Like, I'm really struggling with this, what am I doing wrong in this instance? And be as detailed as you can. Again, expect that it is a two-way street. You're not just going to get something, but that you can also give something for the information that you are receiving from that person. So be prepared for that. Also with drive, make sure that you are in a good frame of mind to be driven and to start this process of becoming an influencer, or the process of making money for yourself. We'll use the E word again. Becoming an entrepreneur. If you are going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to be a cosplayer or cospreneur, make sure that you're in the right frame of mind. And by that I mean you aren't going to break yourself by going down the road that you're going down. So if you're dealing with other things, if you have a lot of noise in the background, things that are distracting you, you don't have a great work-life balance, or other things that could be going wrong, whether it's a big deal or whether it's not a big deal, or whether you don't think other people would think it's a big deal. Everybody deals with stress differently. Everybody deals with grief differently. But if there is something in the background, whether it's crushing debt, whatever the case may be, if it isn't something that you're comfortable having out there, then you might want to deal with that first before you go down this road. Because it's not an easy road. It's not like having a job where you just go in and you do what you were assigned to do and you come home and you leave it on a shelf. Entrepreneurship means you kind of do it all the time. Building these sorts of things and being driven to do these sorts of things means you're using all of your free time to do this. So you really have to like what you're doing, but you also have to be in the right mindset and like yourself. You have to be okay with you in order to put you out there so that other people can see what you're doing. If you haven't addressed all of that, it can backfire. Like you can be fake. Like this is it happens all the time, and especially like with cosplay. I'm not saying that there are a lot of fake people out there like listening to this podcast, but what I mean is you're characterizing something, and if for you all this is photo shoot opportunities and modeling, that you can put that veil up and you can be that person, but then behind the scenes you're completely different. It's something you have to live with, but it's also something everyone else has to understand and live with. This can backfire. So if you're not completely genuine, if you're not authentic, if you're someone over here, if you're Clark Kent and Superman, but even at that, let's say The Boys is a good example of this. So everyone thinks you're a superhero, but then you do all these horrible things all the time. This is a really hard thing to maintain, and yeah, it ends up backfiring. You end up putting out a lot of fires as a result of the way that you are versus the way that you want media to portray you. So I would say stay away from that, especially if you're getting started. You don't have a PR group that puts out these kinds of fires. You don't have a firm or a bunch of people in marketing who make you look one way when you're actually another way, and they just kind of sweep all that under the rug. It's really not a good idea. Even when you have all of that, it's not a good idea. There are reasons behind it for an individual, for an influencer, for someone who's getting into cosplay and on social media platforms that we're using primarily to provide organic reach. Be true to yourself. Be ready. Be consistent. The offer is the offer is the offer. Be consistent and be ready with it, and be very clear about what you do and what you do not do. Because if you are offering a service, people will try and take advantage, and they will try and make that service something that they need versus what it actually is. So you have to be very careful. So we'll leave you with this thought. You don't need thousands of supporters not to start. You definitely don't need that many people just to get a small following of people who know you, like you, trust you, and you don't need all of that for drive. If you're only driven by the total followers that you keep gaining, and that you get very frustrated when people don't like all of your posts and when you don't get enough saves and all this other stuff that goes into just Instagram alone, just understand that it's a lot that you take for granted. That you have thousands of people following you. It's a lot of people. It's cities of people that follow you. But drive gets you from where you are now to where you want to go. And if people can see that and they understand that you are headed in a direction, they start to believe in what you're doing. They will become your fans, and they will help you stay motivated. But really the only thing that's going to do that is going to be you. You don't need 1,000 people. You don't need 100,000 or 1,000,000 people to keep you doing something. You just need you, and you just need to get started. This is Scotty B for Heroes of Cosplay Sanctuary Podcast. Thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.